I remember a couple of years back, a few years ago, NVIDIA had come out with a new chip where they demonstrated the moon landing and being able to accurately
Yeah.
show the light that would have been falling and the reflections of light from all the surfaces, and being able to recreate the whole moon landing in graphics through the computer programming that
Yeah, in real time. That was quite fascinating. Some of the issues with the moon landing that people say are suspicious are the lighting. And you see there's no atmosphere, so there's no scattering of light on the moon. And the light is always coming from one direction, and it's just the sun, obviously. And the light rays are all parallel. So we know that any line from a point to a shadow will be parallel to any other line from a point to a shadow. And the light is only coming from one direction, so you would expect things to be lit well on one side but not on the other. Like you would expect it to be like light, like very evenly lit here. But if I was to turn off one of my lights, I would be shaded because everything's coming from this side. But you would expect things to look like, if you think of the moon, you look at the moon in the sky when it's like a half moon. It's bright white on one side and just black on the other side. And people kind of expected that on the surface of the moon because you're being brightly lit from one side. But what they don't account for is that there's all the light being reflected off the surface of the moon. And essentially moonlight is then illuminating the other side. And that's why you have the lighting the way it is. And then you also have issues with the shadows falling on uneven ground, and it makes them look like they're not exactly parallel. But if you actually model it correctly, it does actually work out. Of course, the average person can't boot up their video card and create a 3D model. So again, you have to kind of trust people. But you can demonstrate it. You can kind of rotate the model around and show it from different directions. And it's a pretty useful tool.
Yeah, it was actually fascinating because a lot of people saying that with CGI and stuff like that, but back in the 60s, there was no CGI that did not exist at that point in time. And I even got a video of what one person claimed was Kubrick, who was sitting there talking
Stanley Kubrick.
talking about making the moon landing film. And I was like, I watched the entire thing and I was like, is that really Stanley Kubrick? Because it doesn't look like him. First of all, it's a bearded guy in the dark, badly lit. I don't know. I can't recognize his voice. It's not like I've listened to a lot of Stanley Kubrick interviews, but I was like, this is just it looks like it could be just some random bearded person sitting in a darkish room talking about this. How can I trust that person? But these kinds of conspiracy theories about the moon landing are so popular and so widespread that it boggles the mind. Like I was, in 2018, when I came to Vegas, I had gone to watch a movie, which was First Man. And I was at the counter, I was buying the ticket. And there's this guy next to me and he said that, oh, which movie are you going to watch? I said, First Man. He's like, what's it about? I said, the moon landing, the first man on the moon. He said, oh, do you really think that happened? I said, yeah. I said, maybe you should come with me. We'll watch the movie together. You should check this movie out. It's got all the details about what NASA was up to at that point of time. And he was like, yeah, I'll check it out. So, but it makes me wonder, like, why would people, especially now, because back then people were absolutely astonished by the achievement. But as time has passed, the moon landing hoax conspiracy theory has. Why do you think that is?
It's one of those things it's easy to create a collection of evidence for. And if you kind of just cherry pick all the things that you think are suspicious, it's easy to make a compelling case. There's a variety of like YouTube videos, probably older ones on VHS, where people have done just that. And they say everything they find to be suspicious about the moon landing. And someone watching that with no frame of reference and no real ability to counter those arguments, it's very easy to get sucked in. They show you things like, here's the flag waving on the moon and there's no atmosphere on the moon. That proves that it's fake. And sure, you can come along and then explain what's going on there, but there's so many of these things that it seems to people like the weight of the evidence proves that it's fake. They'll say like the shadows are in the wrong direction. The moon lander looks like it's just made from tinfoil, and there's too many good photographs. The tracks look wrong. Cars shouldn't be able to do that.
You can't see the
You can see strings in this point. Yeah, you can't see the stars. Like the standard arguments that all have been answered literally decades ago come up again and again. And you get new generations. You get kids who didn't grow up knowing anything about the moon landings, and then they hear about it and it's in the wider context for them of like, why should I trust the government? And then they hear about this moon landing hoax and they see a documentary and it looks compelling to them. It's a fun, interesting, and easily believable theory if you're in that mindset and all you look at is this cherry-picked evidence.
But why? But what is the best evidence that should convince us that the moon landing did happen?
Well, one of the best things is the video of it. The thing is, like, the video of the moon landing is actually a continuous TV broadcast of that event. And there is actually no way of actually faking that using the technology of the time. There's kind of a good YouTube video on that somewhere, but you would have to have an infinitely long spool of tape that covered this entire thing and record the entire thing in advance and then play it all back as things were happening. And at the same time, fake these radio broadcasts coming from space, and have all these different tracking stations around them, being able to listen to the broadcasts and also see the rocket take off and then come back in exactly the right trajectory for going around the moon. And then lots of other things as well that prove it. Like there's a laser reflector on the moon right now. And if you wanted to, you could actually make a laser that would be powerful enough to actually, they exist at universities and they bounce lasers off the moon to detect how far away the moon is and whether it's moving away from us or not, which it is. I think it's moving very slowly away from us. And you can test these things. And we've sent more spaceships to the moon now, and they are able to see the lunar landing sites. You can take photographs of it. You can actually see the tracks of people in the ground, where the footprints and where the buggy went around. There's going to be a manned tourist flight to the moon in probably sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah, SpaceX is doing it. Some Japanese guy has chartered it already, and he's taking like 12 of his friends on a flight around the moon. So these things are actually happening right now. We're verifying that space is real and the moon is real, and they'll probably arrange it so they can take photos of the lunar landing site.